Yes, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Faffing Over Frequency podcast. Like normal, I might touch upon the hiatus between episodes, but I think we should sort of just lower the expectations here and think of 2 weeks, the bi-weekly episode of Faffing Over Frequency as the standard. But what I want to dive into today is something that's been playing on my mind a lot, this sort of push up, this part of the off season for myself, because it's sort of everything I've done in bodybuilding is the off season, because I haven't competed yet. Can you even really say it's the off season if I haven't competed, because I haven't had an on season? But you know what I mean. So my sort of mindset or headspace regarding training intensity and the fact that maybe everything or executing or doing everything balls to the wall maybe isn't the best approach for getting everything out of your training and being the most productive bodybuilder that you can be. There's this whole thing of idea that a lot of people treat their intensity in their training intensity as a badge of honor. And I'm here to sort of discuss with you guys or give you guys my take on if I think that is smart or whether there is better, more productive ways to go about your training. So getting right into things, we know that intensity is going to be a key driver of muscle growth. You simply have to be getting inside that range of 5 reps away from failure or shy of failure to actually achieve stimulus in a set. If you end a set 6 reps or 7 reps before a set or before you actually reach failure, you're not getting stimulus for that. We know about this 5 stimulating reps theory, where the final 5 reps of a set before hitting failure are what's creating the stimulus, and each one of those reps closer to failure creates more stimulus. But up to a point, we know that maybe the trade-off for that last rep before failure, the fatigue cost may outweigh the extra stimulus you get compared to leaving 1 rep in reserve. But that would say to you that why do we not just go all out, balls to the walls intensity, and just not leave any reps in the tank at all in any sets if the stimulus keeps rising? It's like sort of directly correlated proximity to failure in relation to what am I going to say here? Proximity to failure in relation to stimulus achieved in a set. But I want to say or raise the question, can intensity be taken too far? So what I want to touch upon is the negatives that are actually sort of associated or come alongside the sets taken past failure. So maybe this is like sets with intensifiers, forced reps, rest pauses, stuff like that. And the things that come along with those are stuff like higher central nervous system fatigue, so CNS fatigue, and that's in the session itself, intra-session, and it's built up across weeks. If you're constantly going past failure on certain sets, there only is 100% output that you can give in a set. But if you're taking an extra forced rep and you're doing things that your body shouldn't really be doing, like maybe you just had an absolute grinder, your training partner or maybe yourself says, come on, one more, and you barely move the load on that leg press, that rep that your training partners just gave you is blowing you up. You're blowing your central nervous system up, and that sort of means that you're capable of less total workload in that session. So that means that's me referring to less volume, less capability to do more volume in that session. While we know volume itself isn't necessarily a driver of muscle growth or hypertrophy, because you have to be in the proximity of failure to get a stimulus, it's if you can get within that proximity, that 5 rep proximity to failure with the extra volume that you're doing, the volume is then a driver of hypertrophy, because if you do more volume, that's more stimulus. End of. If that volume is recoverable, you've got the stimulus from the extra 5 sets you've done compared to someone else. You have got more stimulus for that session. Whilst it's maybe the 10th set of a body part in a workout is nowhere near as stimulating as the first set, it's still extra stimulus, and that sort of ties into how I approach programming and volume sort of landmarks in my training. I aim to do as much volume as I possibly can that's recoverable, because even if that last set is only an extra 5% stimulus, I want that. I don't want to leave that on the table if it is recoverable. Now, these sets taken past failure as well also lead to increased recovery demand following the session. That means you're less capable of touching on a higher frequency approach. If you have to spend longer times recovering between leg days, let's say you have 2 leg days per week, or let's say you have 3 leg days per week, you want to touch on that higher frequency sort of setup. That means you're going to have to be training legs on 2 sleep frequency at some point during the week. So maybe that's Monday and a Wednesday. If you take sets past failure, you take forced reps on that Monday session, by Wednesday, I don't think you're going to be recovering unless your volume is generally 1 set per body part. And I've experienced that anecdotally, when I was running my higher frequency setup. Even now, I'm still hitting quads 3 times per week. But when I've been maybe away traveling at a different gym, maybe Ultraflex rather, weekend past, CBAM, Cameron, well done in the classic overall, mate, by the way, gave me a pretty fucking gruel forced rep on the Nitrum leg press. That was on a Sunday. I came to my Wednesday leg day and I don't think I was fully recovered for that, because the sort of the tax or the impact that these forced reps have on recovery, and even in the set or in the session, that set past failure has such a negative knock-on to subsequent sets. So funny enough, Cameron gave me that forced rep on the first set of compound quad work, and I think I could have maybe got a better back off set on if I didn't take that forced rep. But you live and you learn. That's something to be massively considerate of, and it's why I will get on to my approach with sort of intensity and my guidelines to intensity. But I don't go for that 50-50 rep. I'd rather leave the set at 0 reps in reserve rather than attempt a 50-50 rep and fail it, because I don't want the negative knock-ons. Now, these sort of negatives can also go for the sets that are not taken past failure, but immense levels of mental arousal are achieved or necessary for going into sets. So you'll see a lot on social media, people talking about getting really amped up for a set, and legs are earned, not given. You need to be up for your sets, aroused. You need to start crying before a set. The music needs to be blurring in your ears for you to actually grow muscle. And that's not the case. If you're getting severely mentally aroused before a set, that's again going to touch on this central nervous system fatigue, increased recovery demand. You're going to come out of your sessions, even certain sets, feeling like an absolute vegetable, because it's just sort of zapped or drained all sort of life or energy out of you when you get so aroused for a set, to the point where you get goosebumps. Like I've got goosebumps for many a sets, not particularly this push-up, as that's why I'm making this podcast. I've changed my headspace or my mindset, my outlook on stuff like this. But last push-up, 100% before most leg sets, goosebumps, and I have to wait till I actually feel aroused, like I could run through a brick wall before going into a leg set. But it's different this time around. And when you're doing that or achieving or aiming for that mental arousal before a set, you're going to run into things like faster deloads. You're going to need to deload more frequently because that nervous system fatigue is building up across weeks. The sessions themselves are going to be more fatiguing, more taxing, because you're mentally draining yourself as well as physically draining yourself from actually training. You're going to have less composure inside of sets. You know, if you're ready to run through a brick wall, as I previously said, because the music's in your ears, Hans Zimmer, what tune? Mountains by Hans Zimmer is screaming at you. Whatever part of an orchestra can scream at you, I don't know. You're going to rush your sets, probably speed up your tempos, maybe forget your pauses, maybe ruin your range of motion. You're going to be more burnt out by the end of your session. So say you have a leg day, you have calves and a glute drive at the end of your session. If you're getting mentally aroused for your every set of your hack squat, every set of your leg press, every set of your seated ham curl, every set of your leg extension, you're going to be a vegetable by the end of that session. You're not going to be able to produce quality work on those final movements. And almost the biggest thing, we know that progressing training and progressing overload is vital. It's essential for building muscle. You know, you have to be getting stronger over time. And once you start touching into this high level of mental arousal before your big movements, you're now relying on that crazy level of arousal to progress your numbers. You know, if you get so close to tears, borderline tears, you're thinking of dead family members before your hack squat, the next week, imagine you've had a longer day, maybe you're training after your shift at work, and you simply don't have the energy to get into that spot. There's going to be a big disparity in numbers, because you know you can't generate that same level of oomph or just aggression going into a set. So you can't keep your variables consistent heading into that set, so your numbers are probably going to take a hit, and you're going to be fighting for maintenance of that hack squat rather than fighting for progression if you just kept your cool the week prior. Now, coming out of these sessions as well, I touched upon with the sort of forced reps, the high mental arousal, you're going to come out of these sessions themselves feeling trashed, and that's going to lead to stuff like more frequency of illness. It's overall just going to sort of skew your biofeedback and these biomarkers, you know, more frequency of illness, worse appetite, worse digestion. So you're getting ill more frequently, you might have to take time off training because of that. You can't eat your food to recover. Your digestion's worse. Your blood glucose is worse because you're not utilizing your food. You know, your blood glucose can also be elevated because you're so fatigued. You'll notice if you maybe do a hard leg session and you take your fasted blood glucose the next morning. Anecdotally, I find that my blood glucose will rise a couple markers afterwards, and that's just a response to the fatigue. So you could constantly see this biofeedback, like sleep as well, and even cognitive function. You can all see these things taper off, all because you're giving so much to your session, and you have to weigh up, is that trade-off worth it? You know, the extra rep that you're maybe getting on your pendulum squat, by thinking of your dead relatives, is that worse, or is that worth the trade-off of not being cognitively like aware for the rest of the day after your session? Maybe you're training before work and you're just not up to speed when you're in work. Your recovery is worse because you can't eat your food, and your sleep is worse. You know, your sleep latency when you're fatigued, maybe you're in need of a deload. A lot of people notice a higher sleep latency, so longer time taken to fall asleep. So overall, everything sort of takes a hit because you're coming out of your sessions feeling so trashed. And that really does raise the question of, is this necessary, or is there a more productive way to build muscle without every other aspect of my life taking a hit because I want to bury myself on my Cybex linear leg press? But we've touched on the negatives, and I don't want to paint this podcast as only being against these balls to the wall sets, because there's a time and a place. You know, if you look at my Instagram, I've done plenty of sets that have looked like, you know, anyone would sort of look at them and be like, okay, fuck, this guy means something, he's about it, like he trains hard. You look at most of my linear leg press sets, they are balls to the wall. That set, the Cameron, the forced rep on the Nitro, I'm not scared to take these reps, I will do it, but I also I'm not ignorant or stubborn enough to see that there is a different approach that might be more beneficial. But what are we actually gaining from treating your intensity as such a badge of honor and upholding that such high level of training intensity? Right, firstly, we talked about the 5 stimulating reps theory at the start. So I think you're not leaving any stimulus on the table, no doubt. You're coming out of each set with taking every gram, every fucking speckle of stimulus that was there to be taken on that set. And we can obviously make that argument of maybe the trade-off of fatigue versus stimulus on the last rep of a set. Maybe it's not worth it, but you still took more stimulus. Let's ignore the fatigue. Still more stimulus by not leaving anything on the table and taking your set all the way there. You're also gaining a good amount of fulfillment with your training. A large part of physique development is about being fulfilled, hitting big numbers, big sets, and enjoying your training. If you sort of look at this podcast or listen to this podcast and can agree that there's different ways to go about your training, more productive ways that will lead to less frequent deloads, more time in the gym, more stimulating sets. But you can also say to yourself, I just wouldn't enjoy my training as much. My prime example, training with Josh Campbell, you all know him, when we were in Milan. He's someone that sort of brought this idea up to me, or raised the idea in my head, because he trains like with a high level of mental arousal for a majority of sets, and he gets ill a lot. He has to deload quite a lot. He has a good few injuries, but he takes his sets all the way there and past failure, and he grows a lot from it. But I think he cannot, well, I know he can't. He told me, because I raised this question to him of like the illnesses, and that's sort of something that's held his bodybuilding back. I said, do you not think if you sort of took your foot off the gas a little bit with how aroused you get for sets, it might lead to less illnesses because there's less stress on your nervous system correlating to your immune system? Would it be better for your bodybuilding? He said, maybe, but I wouldn't enjoy my training the same, which is a perfect answer. And me coming from the perspective of there can be different ways and more productive ways of training, I can't actually knock anyone for just saying they wouldn't enjoy their training if they took the foot off the gas and didn't train as hard and sort of poured everything into their sets. It's your life. Train the way you fucking want. I'm just here to sort of convey the point that there might be more productive ways, but it's down to you to choose what you're actually going to get the most enjoyment out of. Something I'm constantly talking about to clients and on a lot of my content is bodybuilding consumes so much of your life. Maybe every hour you're thinking about it, even physique development. Uphold your quality of life alongside your bodybuilding. If you're going into the gym 5 days a week, 2 hours a session, and you're not enjoying it because you have to leave a rep in the tank, because Jake Byers said it's more productive for muscle growth, you're being stupid. If you want to send every set balls to the wall, get Adele singing fucking Hello from the Other Side in your ears, get that going, and bury yourself in the pendulum squat every set, bury yourself in the leg press, get beat by every mid-range, but you come out of the gym feeling fulfilled, so be it, mate. You're still going to make progress, and if that's what gets the most enjoyment out of your process, fire away, crack on. Now, another thing that you're gaining from this high intensity is it does earn respect from others. It's sort of along the same lines as being an under-muscled guy on stage but bringing elite conditioning. Yes, you might be under-muscled, but everyone can respect the fact that you work hard. You work for it. You bring in elite level conditioning. No one's really going to slate your muscularity. They're just going to say, okay, more time in the game. Same as your training intensity. No one really cares what you're doing in the gym. If you're doing silly exercises, fucking cuffed at the elbow, lat pull down, no one will care if you're actually training hard, in my opinion, and that's the way it should be. So you do earn a level of respect when you train hard, and that's sort of what you want. Yes, you shouldn't care about what others think, but if you go into the gym and everyone thinks you train like a pussy, it's not the most enjoyable environment. You sort of do want this respect from others, especially guys that are further along in the industry, more popular in the industry, have sort of made it in the industry. They're somewhat above you. I'm not one to think of like a hierarchy of people, but if someone's ahead of you in the industry, they're ahead of you. They can look at your training, and if you train hard, they're gonna have a level of respect for you. Whereas if you train like a pussy because you think leaving 3 reps in reserve is more optimal, they're gonna look at you like, this guy trains like a pussy. I don't really respect him. What's the point of respecting him? That's just the way I look at things. And the final sort of point I have from the benefits, or what you gain from this high level intensity, is you can get away with lower volume sessions. So you might get away with 2-3 working sets per muscle group, and that means you can get away with less time in the gym, and that might be what you want. You don't want to spend 2.5 hours on a leg day. You want to do an hour in the gym, balls to the wall, leave no stimulus on the table in any set, and you want to leave the gym within that 60-90 minutes and be like, okay, yeah, I fucking grown from that. Let me eat and recover, and let's do it all again. And that's an argument as well. People have different responsibilities outside of the gym, and that's something that has to be thought about, considered, taken into consideration when programming intensity and volume and stuff in the training split. If someone doesn't have the time to spend 2 hours in the gym, they might want to just go balls to the wall every set. Now, getting into my approach to training, since we have brought up the positives, the negatives that you might see from taking these sets super duper far past failure with high levels of mental arousal, what way do I approach my training to be the most productive bodybuilder I can by putting on the most tissue that I deem possible in this manner? So what I do is I aim to leave 0 reps in reserve each set. Now, to do this, it does come a lot down to sort of training and maturity, how advanced of a trainee you are. Can you learn or start to recognize how the final rep moves, the speed of final rep moves, the velocity of that final rep before failure? Can you identify that on certain pieces? I know on the likes of a Rogers hip press, an Arsenal pendulum, a prime hack, I know if the mid-range slows up even significantly on a rep, I know I'm very much risking a failure rep, the next rep, or failing my next rep if I go again, because I spent time in the gym. I'm training coming up to 5 years now in the gym, and I think I actually do train to a high level. I'm able to identify the rep speeds, the rep velocities changing as I get further through a set. So I can tell, okay, this is probably the last rep of the set, because if I go again, this mid-range is gonna fucking kill me. And that just takes time. It takes a little bit of understanding resistance profiles. If something's heavier in the short, will you be able to grind through that? Maybe you have to take into consideration at what point you're in your session. If I'm on my first press and it's a press heavy in the short, I might fancy myself to beat the mid-range, or actually try beat that shortened range challenge and lock out the final rep. Whereas if I'm on my third press and I'm using, say I'm in a different gym, and the press I'm doing is heavy in the short again, I might take a bit more consideration into going for that final rep, because I've lost a lot of my oomph in that shortened range, and I might not be able to get that final rep, so I'm likely going to fail that. That's going to have negative knock on to my isolation work, maybe subsequent pressing sets, who knows. But it's about learning the rep speed and what a rep looks like just before failure, because a lot of people won't be able to do that. A lot of people can't gauge reps in reserve because they've never actually hit a failure set. And again, I will back myself to say that I know I can take a set fucking to failure, no doubt about it. So I know what that feels like, know what it looks like. I know when to end it 1 rep before, or on the rep of, just before failure, if you know what I mean, and not hit actual failure. So that does sort of mean that I'm not attempting any 50-50 reps. I'm not attempting to fail a rep or get buried on any movement. Someone on the pendulum squat, I don't want to finish my set at the bottom of that with the weight on my shoulders. I want to always be able to rack the movement, because I know failing that rep, even if it's just one rep and you sort of give up on the rep straight away, you fail, you go for this rep, hit the mid-range, and it's not happening at all. You don't even try to grind through it. You just sort of rack the weight straight away. That's still taxing you to a large degree, a much larger degree than racking the weight, the rep before. And that's going to have negative impact on your subsequent sets. So maybe you progress your top set by a rep and you go for a second rep progression and you fail that. Now your back off's probably going to only maintain or even regress, whereas it could have took a +1 if you weren't so greedy on that top set and just stuck with your +1 progression. But in terms of intensifiers and stuff, or forced reps with a training partner, I've brought up the Cameron example. I'm rarely using these things, these forced reps, these myo rep sets, these drop sets, because my approach to training is my sort of mindset or training ideology is conserve your energy for more straight sets. If you can maximize your recoverable volume just through straight sets, I think it's going to lead to more progress, more stimulus, more muscle growth, whatever you want to say, than taking 2 forced reps on your leg press, because you're not going to be able to get an extra 2, 3, 4 sets of quads that workout, whereas someone who just racks before they fail can achieve that extra bit of volume in their session, because they're not burnt out mentally and physically. They don't have the quad shakes going into their second set of quads. They're fine to keep going, so they can keep accumulating this effective volume. I can keep accumulating this effective volume, whereas someone was crying on their top set of pendulum, they're smoked. They can't do it. Say they had what song will we go for? In This Shirt by, what is it, the Irresistibles, I think the song is. It's like, I am lost. That one. I hope you all like that parody or that cover there. But that's one that I used to pull out of the locker, and I still do sometimes, but it's reserved maybe once every couple of months, because you can really take it to a dark place with that song. Say that I had that on for their first compound set, then they reach failure on that set, they take a forced rep, they have emptied the tank already, and it's the first compound set of the workout. Whereas me, I'm maybe going in with a bit more of a chill tune, maybe just a bit of rock, a bit of Metallica. I'm not, overly amped up for the set. I don't have goosebumps. I'm not thinking of my dead granny, fucking dog dying, something like that. Milo's actually sitting below me. I hope he didn't hear that, because I think if he died, I actually would maybe just empty everything in a leg session. But that's beside the point. If you keep your sort of recoverable volume just for more straight sets, I think you're going to end up with more total stimulus than doing a drop set on the end of your leg extension. I think if you get away with 2 sets and a drop set on a leg extension, I think the 3 straight sets, as opposed to the drop set on top of the 2 sets, would be far more productive from a CNS perspective, upholding CNS, not having to deload as frequently, and just getting more work done in that session. So that is sort of everything I wanted to touch upon regarding intensity and treating it as this badge of honor. Is it holding you back training to such a level of intensity? Is it can you upkeep that? Can you uphold that? Is it maintainable or sustainable is the word I'm looking for? Can you sustain that level of intensity for years on end? and not be deloading every 6 weeks, because that's another point. We don't want to realistically deload. Deloading is the one part of your bodybuilding process where you're not taking steps forward in your physique, because you're not training, you're not delivering a stimulus for the body to create an adaptation and grow muscle. So take what you want from this. If, again, as I said earlier, if you wouldn't enjoy your training the same by not taking sets all the way there, and I still have moments where I will get on the verge of running through this brick wall analogy before set, heavy set of deadlifts, for example, maybe a milestone number on a leg press or a hack squat. I'm going to get fucking up for it, but I'm reserving that energy, reserving that mental arousal for every couple of sessions, maybe every couple of weeks or months. When it's not needed, it's not needed, and I think it's more productive to keep that in the arsenal and pull it out when it's necessary. As a good friend of mine that's probably listening once said, when it's time to pull the rabbit out of the hat, you pull the rabbit out of the fucking hat. Yeah, great quote. But with all these podcasts, I do like to end with a little takeaway of the week that's just sort of outside of the main topic of the podcast. And for this week, what I want to just sort of mention is, if you bodybuild or you aspire to be part of the bodybuilding industry, maybe you want to make it as a coach, maybe you want to make it as an influencer, maybe you want to be a sponsored athlete, a sponsored bodybuilder and bodybuild full time, you need to be going to bodybuilding shows. You need to be networking with others, interacting with others, and get your name out there. It's something I feel so passionately about, because I started my Instagram account in late 2023. I was a nobody in the industry, and now, not to blow my own trumpet, and I think everyone can agree, follower count isn't huge. I'm less than 2,500 followers on Instagram, but I'm somewhat of a name in the industry. Guys will know me, guys watch my YouTube, Instagram, you listen to the podcast, and that's all came as a result of my own graft, investing money, time, work holidays to go over, meet other bodybuilders, these trips to Scotland, these trips to shows in England, the trip to Milan, and then my first international show just with Lewis and Josh. I have no ties to be there other than the fact they're my mates and I want to go to a bodybuilding show. But other people seeing on socials that you're going to these events, it repaints the image of you in their head of, okay, there's something about this guy, he's going to these events, he's attending these events. Yeah, he's attending these events, and that's important. You want to make it in the industry. You're not going to do it by solely posting training clips, in my opinion. Get out there, get interacting with others, get networking, and you will see progress and return on interest, return on investment when you start sort of getting out and about. So guys, that will do it for another episode of the podcast. If you did enjoy, please like, share, subscribe, story tags as always, and I will catch you guys in the next one.